There is something happening in your body right now that you have been trained not to notice. Not because it isn't there, not because it requires special equipment to detect, but because the entire architecture of how you've been taught to think about your own biology has been built around a single, unexamined assumption that what you are is fixed, that the body you inhabit follows a one-way trajectory, and your only job is to manage the decline gracefully, supplement it intelligently, and accept what cannot be changed. That assumption is the thing we are going to look at today, not argue with, not replace with a more optimistic story. Look at directly. Because here is what I have found, and what the science is beginning to confirm in ways that should stop you cold. The assumption itself, the act of holding it, the daily unconscious repetition of it, is not a neutral observation about your biology. It is an instruction, and your cells have been following it. This is not metaphor. This is not motivation. This is the part where we go slow, because what you are about to see, if you are willing to look at it without flinching, will change the relationship you have with your own body at a level that no supplement, no protocol, no morning routine has ever touched. Because those things work on the body from the outside. What we are doing today works from the place where the body receives its most fundamental instructions, the place where observation itself becomes biology. Stay with me. This is going to require you to look at several things you have been avoiding. And each time you look, something will shift. Not because I am telling you it will, because that is what happens when you stop looking away. Let's begin with what you actually know. Underneath the assumption, you know that your body is not static. You know this because you have watched it change. You have seen wounds close. You have watched infections clear. You have observed the way a bruise moves through colors and then disappears. The way broken bones knit themselves back together. The way your body, without any conscious instruction from you, orchestrates processes of staggering complexity to return itself toward wholeness. You know this. You have seen it. And yet, at some point, you accepted a story that said, yes, but that's repair. That's maintenance. The trajectory is still downward. The best you can do is slow the decline. Look at that story for a moment. Just look at it. Don't defend it. Don't dismiss it. Just watch it sitting there in your mind and notice something. You did not arrive at that story through careful personal observation. You inherited it. It was handed to you by a culture, by a medical model, by the aggregate weight of everyone around you who also inherited it and then performed it so consistently that it began to look like biological fact. It is not biological fact, and the science that is beginning to dismantle it is some of the most extraordinary science being done anywhere in the world right now. Here's where we need to get specific, because specificity is the only thing that will let you actually see what I am pointing at. Inside every cell in your body, there is a structure called a telomere. You may have heard this word. But I want you to understand it in a way that goes deeper than the surface explanation. Because the surface explanation, while accurate, leaves out the part that changes everything. Telomeres are the protective caps at the ends of your chromosomes. Think of them like the plastic tips on shoelaces. They protect the chromosome from fraying during cell division. Every time a cell divides, telomeres shorten slightly. This is a known biological process, and for decades, the shortening of telomeres has been used as a primary marker for cellular aging. short telomeres, old cells, long telomeres, younger cells. The story seems simple. Divide enough times, telomeres get short enough, cells stop dividing properly, and you age. But here is what that story left out. In 1984, a molecular biologist named Elizabeth Blackburn, working with her graduate student Carol Greider, discovered an enzyme. They called it telomerase. And what telomerase does is something that the fixed trajectory model of aging never predicted, never accounted for, and still has not fully integrated into the mainstream story it tells about your body. Telomerase rebuilds telomeres. Not metaphorically, not approximately. It adds back the nucleotide sequences that cell division removes. It reverses, at the molecular level, the primary measurable marker of cellular aging. Blackburn and Greider won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2009 for this discovery. This is not fringe science. This is Nobel-level, peer-reviewed, replicated foundational biology. Now here is the part that should stop you. Telomerase is not fixed in your body. It is not a static enzyme that either works or doesn't. Its activity, meaning how much of it your cells produce and deploy, is variable. It responds to conditions. It responds to signals. And among the signals that have been shown in controlled studies to significantly affect telomerase activity are signals that originate not in your biochemistry, but in your psychology. Your perception of your own aging affects the enzyme that rebuilds the biological marker of aging. Let that sit for a moment. This is not a claim about positive thinking. This is a claim about a specific, measurable molecular cascade that begins with how you hold your experience of your own body and ends with whether or not an enzyme is actively lengthening or allowing the shortening of the structures that determine how your cells divide. And if you are willing to look at this without the reflex to either dismiss it or over-spiritualize it, what you'll see is something that changes the fundamental question. The question is no longer, how do I slow my aging? The question becomes, what have I been signaling to my cells, and what happens when I change that signal? That is the question we are going to spend the rest of this transmission answering, not with hope, with observation. If what you are seeing here is landing for you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Now let's keep going. But first, I want to take you somewhere. I want to show you something through a story. Because sometimes the clearest way to see a truth is to watch someone else encounter it. There was a woman named Mara. She was 53 years old and she had, by every external measure, accepted her age with grace. She ate well, she exercised, she slept reasonably. She had done everything the reasonable, educated, modern approach to health told her to do, and she had in the process developed a relationship with her body that she would have described as respectful, even loving. But there was something she had never looked at directly. Every morning when she passed the mirror in her bathroom, there was a moment, a fraction of a second, where something happened before she could stop it. Before the conscious, graceful, accepting part of her could intervene, there was a flash, a contraction, a very specific internal event that she had never named, never examined, never sat with long enough to see what it actually was. She had always moved past it quickly because looking at it felt like vanity, like the kind of shallow preoccupation she had decided she was above. She had told herself the story that she had made peace with aging, and the story was so well constructed, so morally satisfying, that she had never noticed it was constructed around something she refused to see. One morning she stopped, not because anything dramatic happened. She just, for reasons she couldn't explain, didn't move past it. She stood there and let herself look at what was actually happening in that fraction of a second. And what she saw surprised her. It wasn't vanity. It wasn't grief about lost youth. It wasn't even fear of death, which would have been at least comprehensible, at least something she could have worked with. What she saw when she finally looked directly at it was something stranger and more fundamental. It was a kind of confirmation, a daily ritual of looking at her face and seeing evidence that she was right, that the body she inhabited was following the expected trajectory, that the story she had inherited was accurate. She wasn't grieving her aging, she was verifying it. Every morning, in that fraction of a second, she was looking at her body and finding proof, and then carrying that proof into her cells for the rest of the day. When she saw this, really saw it not as a concept, but as a thing she was actually doing, she didn't feel ashamed. She didn't feel motivated to change. She felt something much quieter and more powerful than either of those things. She felt the thing shift. Not because she decided to think more positively, not because she replaced the old story with a new one, but because the act of seeing it clearly, of watching it without looking away, changed what it was. The verification ritual lost its invisibility, and without its invisibility, it lost its power to run automatically. This is the thing about unconscious patterns. They do not survive direct observation, not because observation magically dissolves them, but because the pattern requires your non-looking in order to function. It runs on the energy of your avoidance. The moment you look at it steadily, without flinching, without immediately replacing it with a more comfortable interpretation, it has to change. Because it was never designed to be seen. It was designed to operate in the space where you weren't looking. Mara kept standing there. She looked at her face, and instead of the automatic verification, she did something she had never done before. She simply watched. She watched without the story, without the confirmation, without the inheritance. She looked at the face in the mirror the way you might look at something you've never seen before and genuinely want to understand, and something extraordinary happened. Not the thing you might expect, not some vision of youth or sudden transformation, something quieter and more precise than that. She noticed that her face was alive, not in a poetic sense, in a literal, observable sense. She watched the subtle movement of breath. She noticed the way the light caught the texture of her skin in a way that was specific and particular to this face, this moment, this exact configuration of a living system. She saw, for the first time in years, not evidence of a trajectory, but evidence of presence, and she understood something she could not have understood without looking. The body she had been verifying as aging was the same body that was at this exact moment running millions of simultaneous processes of maintenance, repair, adaptation, and renewal. The aging she had been confirming was one story about one set of observable changes, but it was not the whole of what was happening. It was not even close to the whole. She had been watching one channel and calling it the whole broadcast. This is what I want you to see, not just about Mara, but about yourself. Because if you are honest, if you are willing to look, without the grace of your own self-story protecting you from the view, you will recognize the mirror moment. You will recognize the fraction of a second where you look at your body and find confirmation. And I'm not here to tell you that confirmation is wrong. I am here to ask you to look at what you are actually confirming and what you might be missing in the fraction of a second where you rush past the looking. What did you notice when you recognized your own mirror moment just now? Drop it in the comments. Not the concept, but the specific thing you saw when you stopped rushing past it. Because here is what the science says about that missing. In 2004, Alyssa Epel, a researcher at the University of California, San Francisco, published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that connected psychological stress, specifically the experience of chronic stress and the perception of chronic stress, to telomere length and telomerase activity in human cells. The study looked at mothers caring for chronically ill children, a high-stress group, and it found that the women who perceived their stress as highest had telomeres that were, on average, significantly shorter than those who perceived their stress as lower, even when controlling for the objective demands of their caregiving situation. The perception of stress, not just the stress itself, was associated with measurable changes in the biological structures of cellular aging. And then, in subsequent research, the inverse was explored. What happens to telomerase activity when the perception shifts? When the experience of the body changes? When the psychological relationship with one's own aging is altered? The results were not subtle. Interventions that changed how people held their experience, meditation practices, mindfulness training, practices that shifted the relationship from reactive to witnessing, from confirming to observing, produced measurable increases in telomerase activity. The enzyme that rebuilds the biological marker of youth became more active when the psychological stance toward the body changed. This is the mechanism that the title of this transmission is pointing at. Not magic, not mysticism. A specific, measurable molecular pathway that connects how you observe your own body to what your body does at the cellular level. And the pathway runs through something even more specific than stress reduction. It runs through the quality of your attention. Let me show you what I mean by that. There is a field of research that sits at the intersection of psychoneuroimmunology, which is the study of how psychological states affect the immune system and nervous system, and epigenetics, which is the study of how gene expression is regulated without changes to the underlying DNA sequence. This field is young, it is controversial in some quarters, but its findings are consistent enough and replicated enough that they cannot be dismissed without dismissing the methodology of science itself. What epigenetics has established is this: your genes are not a fixed program, they are a library. And what gets read from that library, which genes are expressed and which are silenced, is regulated by a complex system of molecular switches called epigenetic marks. These marks include things like methylation patterns, histone modifications, and the activity of small RNA molecules. They are, in the language of the field, the software that runs on the hardware of your DNA. And here is the extraordinary part, the part that should make you stop and look. These epigenetic marks are not fixed. They change in response to environment. They change in response to behavior. They change in response to what you eat, how you move, how much you sleep. All of this is established science, and most people who are interested in health and longevity are at least broadly aware of it. What is less broadly understood is that they also change in response to psychological states, to chronic patterns of thought and perception, to the stories you hold about yourself and your body, to, and this is the part that connects everything we have been building toward, the quality and direction of your attention. In 2013, a team of researchers published findings in the journal Psychoneuroendocrinology showing that a single day of intensive mindfulness practice produced measurable changes in the expression of genes associated with inflammation, circadian rhythms, and chromatin remodeling, which is one of the key mechanisms through which epigenetic marks are set and reset. One day, not years of practice, one day of a specific quality of attention directed inward produced changes at the level of gene expression. Now, I want to be precise here because precision is the only thing that protects this from becoming wishful thinking. These studies do not prove that you can think your way to reversing biological aging in the way that phrase is usually understood. They do not suggest that belief alone reshapes your genome. What they demonstrate is something more specific and more interesting. The quality of your internal attention, the way you hold and direct your awareness toward your own body and your own experience, is a biological input. It is a signal that your cells receive and respond to, and among the genes that respond to that signal are genes associated with inflammation, with stress response, with immune function, and with the regulation of the very telomere maintenance systems we have been discussing. Your attention is not separate from your biology, it is part of it. It is one of the inputs your body uses to decide what to express. And if that is true, and the evidence says it is, then the question of what you have been signaling with your attention becomes not a philosophical question, but a biological one. What have you been telling your cells, not in words, in the quality of your daily attention, in the automatic, unconscious, repeated act of looking at your body and finding confirmation of a story about inevitable decline? In the fraction of a second mirror moment that you have been rushing past for years. What has been the signal? Now look closer, because there is a layer underneath this that most people never reach, and it is the layer where the real transformation happens. The signal is not just about what you think about your body, it is about the stance from which you think it. And this is where the quantum mechanics becomes not just a metaphor, but a precise description of what is happening. In quantum physics, the observer effect refers to the fact that the act of measuring a quantum system changes the system being measured. This is not a limitation of our instruments. It is a fundamental feature of reality at the quantum scale. The electron does not have a definite position until it is observed. The act of observation collapses the probability wave into a specific outcome. The observer and the observed are not separate systems, they are entangled. The measurement is not a passive recording of what is already there, it is a participation in what becomes there. Now, I want to be careful here, because the history of quantum mysticism is littered with overclaims that have done damage to both science and to the people who are misled by them. I am not claiming that your consciousness directly collapses quantum wave functions in your cells in the way that electrons collapse in a physics experiment. The scales are different, the mechanisms are different. What I'm claiming is something more precise and, I would argue, more interesting. The quantum observer effect is a demonstration of a principle that operates at multiple scales. That observation is not passive. That what you attend to with genuine, sustained quality attention is not unchanged by that attention. That the relationship between the observer and the observed is not a one-way street where reality sits there and you record it. It is a dynamic relationship in which the quality and direction of your attention participates in what reality becomes. And at the biological scale, this is not a metaphor. It is a measurable fact. The studies I have described are not invoking quantum mechanics as a poetic frame. They are demonstrating through conventional molecular biology and psychology that the quality of human attention directed at the body produces measurable changes in gene expression, telomerase activity, inflammatory markers, and cellular aging processes. The principle that observation participates in what is observed is not limited to the quantum scale. It shows up with different mechanisms but the same fundamental logic at the scale of human biology and human consciousness. And this means something specific for you, right now. In the body you are inhabiting as you listen to this, it means that the way you have been watching your body, the quality of attention you have been directing at your own biology has been a biological event, not just a psychological one. Every time you have looked at your body and found confirmation of decline, you have sent a signal. Every time you have moved past the mirror moment without looking, you have sent a different kind of signal, one of avoidance, and avoidance is its own instruction. And it means that changing the quality of your attention is not a spiritual practice that might, through some mysterious mechanism, eventually affect your biology. It is a direct biological intervention, one that operates through pathways that are increasingly well understood, even if they are not yet fully mapped. This is the thing no one tells you about the science of cellular aging, not because it's hidden, because it requires you to look at something uncomfortable. It requires you to look at the fact that you have been participating in your own biology in ways you were never aware of, and that some of what you have been signaling has not been serving you. That is uncomfortable. And it is also the most empowering thing I can tell you, because if your attention has been one of the inputs, then changing your attention changes the input, and changing the input changes the output. But here's the critical distinction, the one that separates what I'm describing from every piece of positive thinking advice you have ever been given and found insufficient. The change in attention that produces biological change is not the replacement of one story with a better story. It is not the substitution of "I am aging" with "I am getting younger." That substitution is still operating at the level of story, and stories, however well-intentioned, are not the same as observation. The change that produces biological change is the shift from reacting to witnessing. Let me show you what that distinction actually means in your body. When you look at your body and react, you are doing something specific. You are taking in sensory information, running it through a filter of expectation and story, arriving at a conclusion that confirms the story, and then generating a physiological response to that conclusion. The response might be subtle, a slight contraction, a microtension in the chest, a barely perceptible shift in your breathing. But it is real, and it is a signal, and your cells receive it. When you look at your body and witness, you are doing something categorically different. You are taking in sensory information and staying with it before it reaches the story. You are observing the actual sensation, the actual appearance, the actual reality of your body in this moment, without immediately running it through the filter that tells you what it means. You are, in the language of contemplative traditions that have been describing this for thousands of years, watching without grasping or pushing away. And this distinction, this specific difference in the quality of attention, is what the research on mindfulness and gene expression is actually measuring. It is not measuring relaxation, it is not measuring positive thinking. It is measuring the biological effects of a specific quality of attention, one that observes without immediately reacting, that witnesses without immediately concluding. That quality of attention is what we are going to practice now, not as a metaphor, not as a spiritual exercise that you do in the hope that something eventually shifts. As a direct biological intervention, one that you can feel in your body as you do it, and one whose effects, if you practice it consistently, are measurable at the molecular level. Pause here. This is not a thought exercise. This is an observation. I want you to bring your attention to your body right now, not to how you feel about your body, not to what you think about your body, to your body itself, to the actual physical present moment reality of it. Start with your hands. If you can, look at them. If you are listening without looking, bring your awareness to the sensation of them, the temperature, the weight, the subtle aliveness that is always there when you pay attention to it. Now watch something specific. Watch the fact that your hands are, right now, doing something extraordinary. They are maintaining a temperature differential between your skin and the air around you. They are circulating blood through vessels so fine that some of them are narrower than a single red blood cell, which means the blood cells are deforming slightly to pass through them. They are transmitting information through nerve fibers at speeds of up to 70 meters per second. They are doing all of this without any conscious instruction from you. Just watch that, not the concept of it, the actual reality of it. The fact that the hands you are looking at or feeling are, right now, running processes of staggering complexity and precision. Now notice what happens in your relationship with those hands when you watch them this way. Notice whether the story about aging, about decline, about the expected trajectory can maintain itself while you are actually watching what is happening in your hands right now. It can't. Not fully. Because the story is about an abstraction, a trajectory through time, and what you are watching is a present moment reality that is not abstract at all. It is specific, it is alive, it is happening. This is the shift. This is the move from reacting to witnessing, and it is not a move you make once. It is a move you make again and again every time the story reasserts itself. Every time the filter tries to replace the observation with a conclusion. Every time you make that move, you are sending a different signal. Stay with your hands for another moment. And now I want you to notice something else. Notice the sensation of your own attention, the feeling of directing your awareness towards something with genuine curiosity rather than with confirmation seeking. There is a quality to that attention that is different from ordinary looking. It is more open, less certain about what it is going to find, more interested in what is actually there than in whether it matches the expected story. That quality of attention is what the research is pointing at when it shows changes in gene expression from mindfulness practice, not the relaxation, not the stress reduction, though those matter too. The quality of the attention itself. The genuine, curious, non-reactive observation of what is actually happening in the body. Your cells respond to that quality. They respond to it because it is a fundamentally different signal than the signal of confirmation and avoidance. It is a signal that says, I am here, I am watching. I am interested in what is actually happening, not in what I have decided is happening. And your biology, which has been waiting for that signal, which has been running on the signal of inherited story and unconscious confirmation, begins to respond differently. Now let's go deeper, because there is a layer underneath the quality of attention that most people never reach. And it is the layer where the most extraordinary biology is happening. There is a concept in longevity research called the epigenetic clock. This is a method developed by a biostatistician named Steve Horvath at UCLA, published in 2013, that uses patterns of DNA methylation, which are epigenetic marks, to estimate biological age. Not chronological age, biological age. The actual age of your cells as measured by the state of their epigenetic marks, independent of how many years you have been alive. What Horvath's clock revealed was something that the fixed trajectory model of aging was not prepared for. It revealed that biological age and chronological age are not the same thing, and that the gap between them is not small. Some people in their 50s have the biological age of people in their 30s. Some people in their 30s have the biological age of people in their 50s. The divergence is real, measurable, and significant. And when researchers began asking what accounts for the divergence, what they found was not primarily genetic. Genetics explain some of it, but the factors that explain most of the divergence are behavioral and environmental. They are the inputs your epigenetic system receives, the signals your cells have been given about what to express. Among those inputs, the psychological ones, the quality of your attention, the chronic stress patterns, the perception of your own aging, the stance from which you inhabit your body are not minor contributors. They are significant ones. Significant enough that researchers studying the epigenetic clock have begun to take seriously the possibility that targeted interventions in psychological states and attentional patterns could produce measurable changes in biological age as measured by the clock. This is the cutting edge. This is where the science is right now. Not in a lab far from you, in your cells. In the methylation patterns that are being set and reset by the signals your body receives, including the signals that originate in the quality of your attention. And here's what makes this specific to you, in a way that no general health advice can be. The epigenetic marks that are most responsive to psychological inputs are not distributed randomly across your genome. They cluster around certain categories of genes, genes involved in inflammation, genes involved in stress response, genes involved in immune regulation, and genes involved in what researchers call cellular senescence, which is the process by which cells stop dividing and begin secreting inflammatory signals that accelerate aging in surrounding tissue. Cellular senescence is one of the primary mechanisms of biological aging. Senescent cells, sometimes called zombie cells, are cells that have stopped dividing but haven't died. They persist in tissue and release a cocktail of inflammatory molecules called the senescence-associated secretory phenotype, or SASS. This inflammatory environment accelerates the aging of neighboring cells, damages tissue function, and is associated with virtually every age-related disease from cardiovascular disease to neurodegeneration. And the rate at which cells enter senescence is regulated, in part, by the signals they receive from the stress response system. Chronic activation of the stress response, driven by chronic perception of threat, including the chronic perception that your body is in inevitable decline, accelerates cellular senescence. This is the mechanism. This is the specific biological pathway through which the story you hold about your own aging becomes the aging itself. You are not just thinking about decline, you are, through the stress response cascade that the perception of decline triggers, creating the conditions in which your cells age faster. And the inverse is also true and also measurable. Reducing the chronic activation of the stress response through practices that shift the quality of attention from reactive confirmation to genuine witnessing reduces the signals that drive cellular senescence, increases telomerase activity, changes the expression of genes associated with inflammation and cellular aging. The biology of becoming younger is not a fantasy. It is a measurable possibility that lives in the gap between your chronological age and your biological age. And the primary lever for moving that gap in the direction that serves you is not a supplement. It is not a protocol. It is the quality of your attention. Look closer, because there is something else here that I want you to see. Something that the scientific framing alone cannot fully illuminate. And for that, I need to take you back to a story. There was a man named Elias. He was 61 years old, and he had spent the better part of a decade studying longevity. He knew the research. He knew about telomeres and telomerase. He knew about epigenetics and the epigenetic clock. He knew about the senescence-associated secretory phenotype. He could explain in precise technical detail the molecular mechanisms through which lifestyle and psychology affect biological aging. And he was aging faster than his chronological age would predict, not dramatically, not in ways that were obvious to anyone who didn't know what to look for. But when he had his biological age assessed using epigenetic clock methodology, the number that came back was not what his knowledge and his practices should have produced. He was, by the measure of his own cells, older than he expected. He spent months trying to understand why. He adjusted his diet. He refined his sleep protocols. He added and subtracted supplements based on the latest research. And the number didn't move much. Then one day, sitting with a teacher who was not a scientist, but who had spent 40 years studying the relationship between attention and experience, he was asked a question that he had never been asked before. The teacher said, "When you observe your body, what are you looking for?" Elias started to answer with the scientific vocabulary he had spent years developing. He talked about biomarkers, about inflammatory signals, about the indicators he tracked to assess his biological trajectory. The teacher waited until he was finished and then asked again, "Not what do you measure, what are you looking for?" And Elias stopped, because he understood in the silence that followed the question that he had been looking for evidence that his interventions were working, that his knowledge was sufficient, that his protocols were correct. He had been using his attention to his body not as a genuine act of observation, but as a performance review, a quality check, an ongoing audit of whether he was winning the battle against aging. He had been, in the most sophisticated possible way, doing exactly what Mara had been doing in the bathroom mirror. He had been looking at his body and finding confirmation, not of decline, but of his expertise, of his control, of his ability to manage the trajectory. And in doing so, he had been running the same underlying signal. The body is a problem to be managed. The trajectory is something to be fought. The default, without intervention, is deterioration. That signal, running beneath all his sophisticated knowledge and all his careful protocols, was the signal his cells had been receiving. And it was a stress signal, because managing a problem is a stress response. Fighting a trajectory is a stress response. The fight or flight system does not distinguish between a tiger and a belief that your body is in decline and requires constant vigilant management. It responds to perceived threat, and the perception of the body as a problem to be managed is a form of perceived threat. Elias sat with this for a long time, not with shame, not with the impulse to fix it. He just watched it. He watched the pattern of his own attention with the same precision he had been applying to his biomarkers. And in watching it, he began to see something he had never seen before. He had never actually looked at his body without an agenda. He had looked at it to assess it, to measure it, to manage it, to improve it. But he had never simply observed it, never brought to it the quality of attention that genuine curiosity produces, the kind that is not looking for confirmation of what it already believes, not looking for evidence that the interventions are working or failing, but genuinely interested in what is there. He began to practice that quality of attention, not instead of his protocols, but underneath them. He began to bring to his body the same quality of observation that the mindfulness research was describing, not as a technique for stress reduction, but as a genuine act of seeing. And something changed. Not immediately, not dramatically, but over months, when he had his biological age reassessed, the number had moved in the direction he had been trying to move it for years with protocols alone. He could not prove, and he did not claim, that the change in his attention was the sole cause, but he understood something that his years of research had not been able to teach him, because it required not more knowledge but more seeing. The body is not a problem, it is a process, and the quality of attention you bring to a process determines, in ways that are both measurable and profound, what the process does next. This is the thing I want you to look at now, directly, without the protection of your self-story. What is the quality of attention you bring to your own body? Not the quality you aspire to, not the quality you perform when you are doing your morning routine or your meditation practice. The quality of attention that runs automatically underneath your conscious intentions in the ordinary moments of your day. The fraction of a second in the mirror, the way you think about your body when you are tired, the story that runs when you notice something that doesn't feel right. What is the signal? Has there been a moment in your own life when seeing something about yourself clearly, really clearly, dissolved its power over you? I want to hear that. Tell me what happened in the comments, because that signal, running automatically, repeatedly, every day, is a biological event. It is one of the inputs your epigenetic system uses to decide what to express. It is one of the factors that determines where your biological age sits relative to your chronological age. And looking at it, really looking at it, without rushing past it into either shame or optimism, is the beginning of changing it, not through replacement, through observation. Here is the second practice, and this one goes deeper than the first. Find a moment of stillness. If you can, sit somewhere you won't be interrupted for a few minutes. If you are moving while you listen, let the words guide you into a quality of internal attention, even as your body continues to do what it is doing. Bring your awareness to your body as a whole, not to any specific part, to the whole of it, the weight of it, the temperature of it, the aliveness of it. The fact that right now, without any instruction from you, it is doing approximately 37 trillion things simultaneously, each one coordinated with the others through systems of communication so complex that the most powerful computers on Earth cannot fully model them. Now, I want you to watch something specific. I want you to watch your own attention as you think about your body. Not what you think, how you think it. The quality of the stance. Notice if there is an agenda in the attention, a looking for, an assessment happening, a comparison to some standard, some expectation, some story about what the body should be or where it should be on a trajectory. Don't judge what you find. Just watch it. Now, very gently, see if you can release the agenda. Not replace it with a better one. Release it. See if you can bring to your body an attention that is simply curious, that is interested in what is actually there right now, without comparing it to what was there before or what you want to be there in the future. Just watch what is here. Notice the breath moving. Notice the subtle shifts of sensation that are always happening when you pay attention. Notice the warmth, the weight, the aliveness that is present even in stillness, especially in stillness. And now notice something about the quality of your attention itself. When you bring this kind of witnessing, this agenda-free curiosity to your body, what happens to the stress signal? What happens to the confirmation loop? What happens to the story about the trajectory? It quiets. Not because you silenced it, because you stopped feeding it with your attention. And in that quieting, something else becomes audible. The actual signal of the body. Not the story about the body itself. The aliveness, the ongoing, continuous, extraordinary process of it. That is the signal your cells have been waiting to receive, not the story of decline, not even the story of renewal. The actual present moment, non-narrative reality of a living system that is right now doing everything it knows how to do to maintain and restore itself. Your job is not to manage that. Your job is to stop interfering with it by running a stress signal on top of it. And the way you stop is not by trying to stop. It is by watching, by bringing the quality of attention that sees what is actually there, rather than confirming what the story says should be there. This is the practice. This is the thing that the research is pointing at when it shows that mindfulness practice changes gene expression. Not the technique, not the specific posture or breathing pattern. The quality of attention that the practice cultivates, the shift from reactive confirmation to genuine witnessing. You can do this anywhere, in the mirror, in the shower, walking, sitting, anywhere you have a moment to bring your attention to your body without an agenda. And every time you do it, you are sending a different signal, one that your cells receive and respond to, one that, accumulated over time, produces measurable changes in the biological processes that determine your cellular age. Now let's look at something that sits underneath even this. Because there is a layer that most of the longevity conversation, even the sophisticated epigenetics-informed version of it, tends to avoid. And avoiding it is part of why the results are often less dramatic than the science suggests they should be. The layer is this: the story about aging that you have inherited is not just a belief. It is an identity, and identity is a different kind of thing from belief. Beliefs can be updated with new information. Identity is what you use to filter information in the first place. It is the lens through which you see, not one of the things you see. And changing the lens requires something more fundamental than acquiring new beliefs. It requires watching the lens itself. Think about what it would mean at the level of identity to take seriously the possibility that your biological age is not fixed to your chronological age, that the gap between them is something you participate in determining, that the quality of your attention is a biological input that affects how your cells age. For most people, taking that seriously at the level of identity, not just as an interesting idea, but as a lived reality that changes how you inhabit your body every day, requires giving up something. Specifically, it requires giving up the identity of someone who is aging in the expected way on the expected trajectory, subject to the expected limitations. And that identity, however uncomfortable it might be, is familiar. It is shared. It is confirmed by everyone around you who is also aging in the expected way on the expected trajectory. It is the identity that lets you say, "I'm getting older," with the comfortable solidarity of everyone who nods because they are getting older too. Giving it up is not as simple as deciding to believe something different. It requires watching the identity itself, watching it the way Mara watched the mirror moment, watching it without the story that protects it from being seen. And when you watch it, here is what you will find. The identity of someone aging on the expected trajectory is not a description of a biological reality. It is a performance. It is a set of behaviors, perceptions, interpretations, and attentional habits that continuously recreate the experience of being someone who is aging in the expected way. It requires your participation. It requires your confirmation. It requires the mirror moment, the automatic verification, the daily renewal of the story. And the moment you see that, the moment you watch the performance clearly enough to recognize it as a performance rather than as a description of biological fact, it begins to lose its grip. Not because you decided to be younger, because you stopped deciding to be older. This is the distinction that is almost never made in the longevity conversation. The conversation tends to focus on what to add, the supplements, the protocols, the practices, the beliefs. But the more fundamental question is what to stop. What to stop confirming. What to stop performing. What to stop signaling. Because your body's capacity for renewal is not something you need to add. It is already there. The telomerase is already in your cells. The epigenetic flexibility is already in your genome. The capacity for biological age to diverge from chronological age in the direction you want it to diverge is already present in your biology. What has been suppressing it is not the absence of the right protocol. It is the presence of the wrong signal, the chronic, automatic, unconscious signal of confirmation and avoidance. The daily performance of aging on the expected trajectory. The identity that requires your participation to maintain itself. Stop participating, not by replacing it with a different performance, by watching it clearly enough that it can no longer run automatically. This is the quantum observer effect at the scale of identity. You cannot observe your own identity clearly, with genuine witnessing rather than reactive confirmation, and have it remain unchanged. The observation itself is the transformation, not a step toward it, the thing itself. Look closer. There is one more layer I want to take you to, and it is the one that ties everything together in a way that I think will change how you understand not just your body, but the nature of what you are. In contemplative traditions, across cultures and across millennia, there has been a consistent recognition of something that modern science is only beginning to find language for. The recognition is this: there is a quality of awareness that is not the same as the content of awareness. There is a witnessing that is not the same as what is witnessed. There is an observer that is not the same as what is observed. In Buddhist traditions, this is sometimes called Rigpa, or pure awareness. In Hindu traditions, it is called the Atman, or the witness. In Western contemplative traditions, it is sometimes called the ground of being or the still small voice. In modern psychology, it appears in the concept of metacognition, the awareness of awareness itself, What these traditions are pointing at, and what the research on meditation and consciousness is beginning to confirm, is that there is a quality of awareness available to human beings that is fundamentally different from the ordinary awareness that runs through the filter of story and identity. It is an awareness that can observe the filter itself, that can watch the story without being inside it, that can witness the identity without performing it. And this quality of awareness, when it is brought to the body, produces something that neither ordinary positive thinking nor even sophisticated mindfulness practice tends to produce. It produces a direct encounter with what the body actually is underneath the story. What you find when you bring that quality of awareness to your body is not what the story about aging has been telling you. You find a living system of extraordinary complexity and extraordinary capacity, one that is, at every moment, oriented toward its own renewal, its own repair, its own optimization. A system that has been running renewal processes your whole life, that has been maintaining homeostasis through changes that would have destroyed any human-designed system, that has been healing and adapting and responding with a sophistication that no technology can replicate. And you find that this system, this extraordinary living process, has been receiving a signal that does not match what it actually is. It has been receiving the signal of a thing in decline, a thing on a fixed trajectory, a thing that requires management and supplementation and careful intervention to prevent the inevitable. And it has been responding to that signal. Not because it is broken, because it is extraordinarily responsive, because it is designed to respond to the signals it receives. Because the relationship between your awareness and your biology is not one way. When you change the signal, the biology responds. When you bring to your body the quality of awareness that sees it clearly, without the story, without the confirmation, without the performance, the biology receives a different input, and it responds differently. This is not a promise, it is an observation. Based on what the science is finding, and based on what happens when you actually try it, when you actually bring that quality of witnessing to your body and stay with it long enough to feel what changes, and what changes is not small. There's a third practice I want to give you, the deepest one, the one that requires the most willingness to look. This one is not about your hands, it is not about your body as a whole. It is about the observer itself. Bring your attention inward, not to any particular sensation or part of your body, to the awareness that is doing the attending, to the quality of consciousness that is right now receiving these words and making sense of them. Notice that there is something here that is watching, something that has been watching your whole life, something that watched you as a child, that watched you through every change and transition and transformation your body has undergone, and that is watching now. That watching has not aged, it has not declined, it has not followed the trajectory that the story says your body is following. It is as present and as clear as it has ever been. Now bring that quality of watching, that timeless, unchanging awareness to your body, not to assess it, not to improve it, just to see it. The way that awareness has always seen everything you have ever looked at, with presence, with clarity, with genuine interest in what is actually there. And notice what your body does when it is seen that way, not thought about, not assessed, not managed, seen. There is a softening that happens, a kind of release, a settling that is different from relaxation, deeper than relaxation, because it is not the relaxation of a system that was tense and has now been soothed. It is the settling of a system that has been performing and has now been given permission to stop. Stay here for a moment. Let the awareness that has always been watching simply watch your body. Without agenda, without story, without confirmation or avoidance. And notice, in this quality of attention, is there a trajectory? Is there a fixed direction? Is there a story about where this body is going? Or is there just this? Just the living reality of a body being witnessed by an awareness that has never aged. This is the practice. This is the thing that the research is pointing at us when it finds that the quality of internal attention changes gene expression. Not the technique, not the breathing, the quality of the seeing, the genuineness of the witnessing. The willingness to look at what is actually there. Your body has been waiting for this quality of attention your whole life. Not because it needs your approval, because it is a living system that is exquisitely sensitive to the signals it receives, and the signal of genuine, agenda-free, witnessing awareness is the signal that tells it. You are seen. You are not a problem. You are a process. And the process is trusted. That signal sent consistently changes things at the level of molecules. Now, I want to bring this back to the world you actually live in, because it would be easy to hear everything I have said and file it under interesting ideas to implement when life is calmer. And if you do that, you will have missed the point entirely. The practices I am describing are not additions to your life. They are not more things to do in the morning before you can get on with your day. They are a different quality of attention that you bring to what you are already doing, to the mirror moment that is already happening, to the way you already think about your body when you are tired or in pain or noticing something that worries you. The question is not whether you will attend to your body. You already do. The question is the quality of that attention, whether it is reactive or witnessing, whether it is confirming or observing, whether it is running the stress signal of management and decline or the signal of genuine, curious, agenda-free seeing. That quality of attention is available to you right now, in this moment, in the body you are inhabiting. As you listen to this, it does not require a retreat. It does not require a special practice time. It requires only the willingness to look and to keep looking even when the story tries to reassert itself. And the story will try to reassert itself. This is important to understand. The identity of someone aging on the expected trajectory has momentum. It has been reinforced by years of confirmation by everyone around you who is also confirming it, by a medical and cultural system that has been built around it. It will not dissolve in a single moment of clear seeing, but every moment of clear seeing weakens it. Every time you bring witnessing attention to your body instead of reactive confirmation, you are sending a different signal. And signals accumulate. Epigenetic marks change, gene expression shifts, telomerase activity responds. The biology is not waiting for you to achieve some perfect state of enlightened awareness before it responds. It is responding right now to the quality of attention you are bringing right now. Every moment of genuine witnessing is a biological event. Every moment of reactive confirmation is also a biological event. The accumulation of those moments over days and weeks and months is what the epigenetic clock is measuring. You are not working toward a future result. You are changing the signal now, and the biology is responding now. This is what I mean when I say that the body is activating its renewal processes, not through some mystical mechanism that requires special conditions. Through the basic, measurable, scientifically documented responsiveness of your epigenetic system to the signals it receives. And among those signals, the quality of your attention is not a minor variable, it is a primary one. The research is clear, the biology is clear. The only thing that is not clear is whether you are willing to look at what you have been signaling and to change it. Not through force, through seeing. Let me tell you what I want you to take from this transmission. Not as a list of things to do, as a set of things to see. See that your biological age and your chronological age are not the same thing, and that the gap between them is something you participate in determining through the signals your body receives. See that among those signals, the quality of your attention to your own body, whether it is reactive confirmation or genuine witnessing, is a primary biological input that affects gene expression, telomerase activity, and the rate of cellular senescence. See that the story you have inherited about aging, the fixed trajectory model, the expectation of inevitable decline, is not a description of biological fact. It is a performance that requires your daily participation to maintain itself. See that the moment you watch that performance clearly, without the protection of your self-story, it begins to lose its grip. Not because you replaced it with a better story, because observation is the thing that dissolves what runs on non-looking. And see that the quality of attention available to you right now, the witnessing awareness that has been present your whole life and that has never aged, is the most powerful biological intervention available to you. More powerful than any supplement, more fundamental than any protocol, because it operates at the level where the instructions come from. There is a community of people who are watching this right now, who are sitting with what they have seen in this transmission, who are beginning to look at the mirror moment they have been rushing past for years. If you are one of them, if something in what I have said has landed in a way that goes beyond the conceptual, I want you to do something. Tell me what you saw, not what you thought about what I said, what you saw when you looked. The specific thing you have been avoiding, the quality of your own attention that you noticed for the first time, the moment when the story tried to reassert itself and you watched it instead of believing it. Drop it in the comments. Not because sharing it will make it more real, though it might, but because the act of naming what you have seen is itself an act of witnessing. And witnessing is what we are here for. Type, I see it now. And what has been seen cannot be unseen. Because that is true. Not as a declaration, as a description of what actually happens when genuine observation meets the thing that has been running on your non-looking. Once you have seen it clearly, you cannot unsee it. You can look away again. You can let the story reassert itself. But you will know underneath the reassertion that you have seen it. And that knowing is a different signal. If this transmission has given you something specific to see, something that you could not have named before you listened, then share it with someone who is ready to look, not to persuade them, not to sell them an idea, to give them the chance to see what you have seen. Because when you share this with someone who has been avoiding their own mirror moment, you give them permission to look, and that permission is itself a field that makes the looking easier for both of you. The clarity you have found amplifies when it is witnessed by another, and what two people see together is often more than either could have seen alone. Here's the integration principle I want to leave you with. Not as a slogan, as a practice. Once a day, find the moment when you're looking at your body and running the confirmation loop. The mirror moment, the tired moment, the worried moment. The moment when the story about trajectory is most automatic and most invisible. And in that moment, pause. Not to replace the story, to watch it, to see it clearly, to bring to it the quality of attention that witnesses without reacting. Watch what happens to the story when you do that. Watch what happens to your body when the story loses its automatic quality. Watch what becomes visible when you stop confirming and start observing. That is the practice. That is the intervention. That is the thing the research is pointing at. And it is available to you in every moment when the story would otherwise run unexamined. What you watch, you change. What you avoid watching runs you. And what runs you at the level of your attention to your own body is running your biology. You now know this, not as a concept, as a seen thing, as something you have looked at directly in this transmission and cannot fully unsee. The biology of renewal is not waiting for you to achieve something. It is waiting for you to stop confirming something. It is waiting for the signal of genuine witnessing, for the quality of attention that says, I am here, I am watching, I am interested in what is actually happening, not in what the story says is happening. Your cells have telomerase. They have epigenetic flexibility. They have the capacity to shift biological age in ways that the fixed trajectory model never predicted and still has not fully integrated. The capacity is there. The biology is ready. The only question is the signal. And the signal is yours to change. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are better. Now, in this body, with this quality of attention, in this moment of genuine, unflinching, witnessing seeing, you were never meant to look away from your own aliveness, not from the complexity of it, not from the extraordinary, ongoing, relentless renewal of it. Not from the fact that what you are is not a thing in decline, but a process in motion, one that responds to the quality of the attention it receives. Look at it. Keep looking. Let what you see change what your body does next. Because what you watch, you change, and you have been watching longer than you realize. When the noise of the day has settled and you find yourself in stillness, come back and watch this again. What you see the second time from a quieter place will be different from what you saw the first time. That difference is the practice working.